Eleni is a management consultant and associate professor in BIM and management in the Bartlett School of Construction and Project Management at UCL. Eleni teaches at postgraduate and executive levels. Her research interests lie at the intersection of management, social science, and engineering. She is a steering board member and part-time researcher at the CBC. And prior to joining academia, Eleni worked as an architect and design manager on a number of complex international and varying scale projects in Greece, the Netherlands, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. She's an alumna of TU Delft in the Netherlands and NTUA in Greece. Over to you, Eleni. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks to everyone for your very interesting presentation. So I'll go ahead and share my slides. Hope it works.
That's great, thanks.
It works? Okay, great. So hello, everyone. My presentation today would be again on blockchain. So I will try to not repeat some things that were already mentioned before. And I have been looking at that through a technological, organizational, and environmental lens. So yes, a couple of things about myself. Leo kindly introduced me, and I just want to say that originally I was trained as an architect, so I'm always a construction person. I've worked in different projects, and I'm very much intrigued by digital innovation and different technologies. So when I was working as an architect, I was always the person who would go to the boss to ask to implement a new technology, a new tool. And as an educator, now I'm trying to educate also the new generation into digitalizing the processes and projects. So I will be discussing for approximately 20 minutes. I will be framing blockchain as an innovation, especially on construction sector, and I will be using a very old framework about technology, organization, and environment in order to analyze. And I'll be sharing some of the preliminary findings as well as discussing some implications. So overall, we know that construction is a very project-based industry. So this means that as opposed to other sectors where they're producing products or services, in construction, we have the projects which are organizing how we operate. So it's a very intensive industry in terms of the capital projects. And also it's responsible for all the peculiarities and the challenges that we're usually talking about in construction. So it has a very high demand and supply variability. So every product, capital project as a product, it's very unique. We have unique clients. We also have very unique supply chains. And typically, as stated also before from Balint as well, it has to do also with a lot of overtime and over budget project delivery. And the reason for all this complexity also lies in how the structure of the industry is organized. So we know that we have, at least in Europe, around 95% of construction, they're SMEs, which means that they're very small companies which operate, again, in very thin margins. And in every construction project as a capital industry, we have many different tiers. So we have the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so forth. So we have all these different relations. And all these relations, they're typically quite hierarchical. So this is also organized because of the way that the contracts are organized and procurement is organized in the sector. So, for example, across a project life cycle, and as we said, projects are important because that's how the industry is organized. We had a proliferation of factors, especially during the construction stage. And the more these actors, the more these tiers which are involved, the higher the complexity of the process. And we've discussed a bit about these thin margins, I think. The thin profit margins, I think Balint also mentioned that it's 1.5%. Yeah, we're typically talking about 1%. So we have all these huge projects, infrastructure projects, building projects, housing projects, that the companies associated, they only make 1%. So if you think about this 1%, where can you fit the innovation? So where can you find budget for innovation? And construction is also very opportunistic as an industry. We have a blame culture traditionally, and there is a lot of mistrust. So companies don't trust the goodwill of other partners. They don't trust the knowledge of other partners, how competent they are and how reliable they are, especially when exchanging information and prices. So this is also a topic I'm very interested in. So especially about with conjunction to blockchain and how it can be an effort to increase trust in the sector. Now, when we're talking about innovation, typically in construction, innovation is important from other sectors. So we're not very good in construction into really creating new innovations. We either import them from finance, such as blockchain, or the manufacturing sector, or the computer science. We're very slow also to adopt this innovation. So there are interesting ideas around, but we're not really good at disseminating them and really applying these innovations across different tiers and different projects. And there's a very big resistance to change, as well as a regulatory gap. So it's very hard to implement all these new ideas in construction. So that's my favorite picture of construction sites. Of course, not every site is like that, but there are still sites, construction sites, which are like that. So this is something to keep in mind when we're talking about all this fancy tech and blockchain and innovative solutions. Now, as I mentioned before, we like to import innovations from other sectors, and we've already seen that blockchain has provided some good results in other sectors, such as finance, especially with tokenization efforts, but also apart from the utility part to the more transactional part. We know there are applications of blockchain in the logistics sector across different countries. There are many efforts in order to bring transparency in the movement of goods. And also there are blockchain applications in healthcare. Healthcare is also a very data intensive sector, like construction. And there is also a lot of the integrity of data. It's also very important to show the provenance. Now, of course, when we're talking about innovation, especially digital innovation, we have to understand that construction is not very good at that. So I think all of you have seen this diagram from McKinsey, which is from 2016. And I was thinking when we started this session today, could construction be a bit higher now, the last 4 years? And then I saw the presentation of Volker about real estate. Real estate is here. It's more in the middle of the spectrum. No, construction is still down there. Looking at hospitality as well, and Airbnb and all these other very lean tools that they're using. I think construction it's still down there, and it has very low digitalization index. Now, because I was looking again in this diagram, at the top of the diagram of the very digitally mature industries, especially software engineering and IT, all of these sectors have been developed a lot by using the paradigm of open innovation. So this is an interesting concept. So I tried to look a lot on that. I know also Volker made a mention on this paradigm, which has to do with essentially looking at opening the boundaries of the firm, so that the firms can share research developments from outside their organization. So they could share R&D, but also they can capitalize and make profit and internalize technologies that have not originated from their sector. So especially, for example, in the semiconductors industry, this is typically what they do. So companies come together and they discuss, they create a new standard, they create a new development in their sector. And then some companies might roll out the next update, and then the other company, the other competitor might roll out the next update 3 months later. So they're continuously working together, although they are competitors, but they work together in order to make the best use of their internal and also external capabilities. Now, innovation as a concept has to do with anything which is new. So whatever has the word new inside, it's innovative. So it means that it creates a change, and we need an effort to make an effort to internalize the change. So because the construction sector is also very project-based, all the things that we can learn from other sectors, there are key books about innovation like The Innovator's Dilemma, Reinventing Organizations. So all of these books, they're great, but most of the times the lessons are not really transferable to construction, because construction is very project-based and there is a lot of knowledge being lost from going from project to project, operating in all those thin margins that don't allow for additional budgets for R&D. So I looked at this engineering framework, the Petrol engineering framework, which essentially it allows to organize knowledge around technology, organization, and environment. And I thought it would be an interesting idea to experiment with while I was researching blockchain. So this framework essentially says that any innovation, especially technological innovation decision-making, relies on factors which are related to technology, to external task environment, and organization. Now, I want to point out that this is a very old framework. So this is a framework from the 80s, from the 90s. And back then, people were talking about employees as Slack. So if you see at the left-hand side of this diagram around organization, so the breakdown of this framework that DiPietro and their team made is that organization, for example, is dependent on formal and informal linking structures, on communication processes, on the size, of course, of different firms like SMEs or large firms, and Slack. So back then in 80s, 90s, they were talking about people working in firms as Slack. So keep in mind, it's an old framework, but sometimes we can get interesting insights from these frameworks. So we used, our methodology was very interpretative. So we were trying to understand and to make sense of data that we were gathering about blockchain. And this took place from desk reviews. So we were looking at all these interesting reports coming from Arab and some professional organizations. We've done a lot of research also at CBC about understanding especially the procurement. And at the same time, I think Balint mentioned there's a new, so we would like to see this new report which came out 3 days ago about time for trust. And further on, we analyzed the data, so we had a lot of interviews. Our intention was through collective knowledge to really understand this issue. And we approached informants from around the world, and all of them were experts in blockchain. So we tried to avoid the impression management and the wishful thinking in order to understand from the real experts what the issues and also the opportunities with this technology would be. So again, looking at these three factors, technology essentially, I don't want to go back and repeat, and it's very good that Balint defined blockchain. So blockchain has some characteristics like traceability, immutability, and so on, which have very good applications, tangible applications for construction, but also blockchain can increase the data interoperability. Construction is very fragmented. We're using different tools to do different things. And it's always an issue of how to integrate these different processes. And of course, there are other issues and limitations of the technology. We know that the technology is very energy intensive, and this is also something to take into consideration. Now, looking at the middle of the slide, here are some themes that were emerging with regards to organization. So always there is this unclear legal entity and legal foundations and formal governance when we're talking about blockchain, depending on where we're looking across the whole project lifecycle. Because we have the construction side, there are some applications in the construction side that we had before, but we also have the real estate, which is part of the whole built environment ecosystem. So there, the things are different because we have one main client who is the main owner. So these are issues that need further work. At the same time, a change that blockchain can create is essentially to have certain supply chains, because the intermediaries and the middlemen, essentially they're being made obsolete. And also blockchain creates new communication patterns. However, when we're looking at the people's issues, so whatever has to do with employees, we know that at the moment we have also a lack of skilled human resources in order to work with these technologies, or even to understand this technology at a more higher and top management level. And there's always the need to align blockchain solutions with the existing commercial models and business models of the different companies. And then when we look at the outside system of the organization, so when we look at the environment, we understand that because construction and the production in construction is organized across systems where different companies are involved, we have to make sure that there are new procurement structures that are going to be supported and be leveraging these new technologies. And this, of course, shifts all the trust that so far supply chains may have based on relations, on long-term partnerships, from this to more data related to trust. So it has to do a lot with the information that is put in the system. Of course, there are many voices talking about government regulation, legitimization of the technology. I like to think that we are doing things here at the CBC which are going to help towards that direction, and we're very keen to essentially work with the industry because we understand that this is an issue which expands across the whole sector, and we want to make sure that we will be able, through sharing this knowledge, to reduce any digital divide that might emerge. So, for example, reaching out towards the conclusion, we could say that there are many different applications. Of course, we've heard some of these in the previous presentation. We heard about smart project contracts, project bank accounts, crowdfunding opportunities, but all of these options, all of these applications, they have to do with an associated organizational transformation process in order to have decentralized and autonomous organizations. And when we're talking about organizational transformation process, we need to take into account that we are really changing the ways that projects and firms in this project-based industry work. So we have to talk about new business models, but also the transformation at the ecosystem level towards a more circular economy, that we can have these more smoother, more lean and seamless information flows. At the same time, and now I'm trying to link a bit to the presentation from Sylvain at the beginning of our session, the concepts of dexterity, they're very important because companies, they are very, very knowledgeable into their business as usual, so doing things as they have been doing. But all of these new technologies, especially blockchain, they create new opportunities, especially, for example, with linking to existing technologies such as building information modeling, with real estate applications, with applications throughout the construction site management, and especially coupling with the IoT. So companies are continuously exploring these spaces, but they need to be able to have ambidexter capabilities as well, so as to go from the business as usual to the business as unusual, because the technology space around blockchain is very fast evolving, and the companies who are just ready to play and experiment with one technology and put it aside, they're not going to be able to pick up. So we are constantly, we will be constantly reminded of this evolving nature of blockchain technology and its need to be integrated across a life cycle of projects. And just to summarize, some of the issues I brought forward in this presentation are issues about ownership and technology standardization. This is how sectors, especially from IT and software engineering, they have reached this high digital maturity we discussed before. Of course, as with any digital technology in construction, there is a skill shortage from lower tiers of the supply chain, especially. The role of government, it's also very important. We also discussed about the governance of these decentralized organizations. And finally, my main idea, I hope if you take one thing from this presentation, would be looking at Dexterity. It's an important concept and will help a lot of companies survive in this digital transformation journey. So thank you very much.